Thank you. Thank you, I think. Not sure how to respond to that. If I ever, I've thought about shaving this thing off, but I feel like I think I'd be greeted as a visitor if I did that, I don't know if I could ever do that now. Hey, thanks for being here today. Today's kind of a rough one out there, right? Ice apocalypse 2017, 2018. I'm sure it'll be right. We got a lot of people here for having some dangerous roads. So thank you for being here. Thank you to our Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to all of our campuses, Sloan Creek, Woodbridge, Espanol, and to everybody who's online. We probably have a big online group today. So hope everybody had a fantastic holiday time. We're going to talk a little bit about New Year's today, but if you don't mind, I'm going to start with a quick story, okay? So back in 1979, a beautiful chocolate brown 1.4 liter 57 horsepower Chevy Chevette, not to be confused by somebody had a Chevette down here, not to be confused with its cousin, the Corvette. The 1979 Chevette rolled off the line in Wilmington, Delaware. Here she is. Yeah, I got some oohs. All right. There she is. Not much to look at, but that car had a long life, went through several owners before it made its way into the hands of my wife. That was her graduation present when she was leaving high school, going into college, and it ended up being mine as well. We got married not too long after that, and this is what she brought to the relationship right here. And I joke, but we loved this car. Now, it wasn't much, it didn't have power. Some of y'all won't understand this, but it didn't have power anything, like no power lock. I mean, you'd manually lock the door with your arms, and no power steering or anything like that. The car did not come with air conditioning or a radio. My wife had installed a radio aftermarket, and the only way it fit in the dash was upside down. So you had to change the station like this. That's not a joke. And topped out, people don't believe this either. Some of you, two people from last service drove Chevettes, and they were very happy about this intro. It topped out at 55 miles per hour. So unless you were going downhill, no speeding. I never got a speeding ticket in this guy. So we loved it. It was our baby. But as all good things, it eventually had to come to an end. This is about 20 years into its life. We had to take it in because it was having some pretty major engine problems. So we take it into and some of y'all will remember this. This was a place in Richardson, but back in the day, there were places that would have it would be like a gas station out front, and then in the back, like a mechanic, and they would work on your car. So we took it to one of those places, and he starts looking at our car, and he gives us the bad news. Hey, there's several, I don't remember exactly, but there's several $100s worth of repair that your engine needs, or you're going to have to drop in a new engine. And we didn't have the money, and we didn't really want to spend that much money on that old of a car. So we said, hey, listen, because we owed them a little bit of money for the tow and for them to look at it and everything. We said, hey, just can you hold it for a week? We're going to try and look for another car this week, and then we'll get back to you and pay you whatever you need or take it or whatever we're going to do. Well, we came back about 9 or 10 days later, okay? So we show up. First of all, the car is not there anymore. It had been sitting out front all week, not sitting there anymore. So we walk around, and we go to the back of where the mechanics are, and we walk into one of the bays, and inside, there she is. But she had a little bit of work done, okay? I'm going to describe to you what I saw as I saw it. I'm going to see if maybe some of you will come up with the same conclusion, detective work, that I did as I was looking at it. First thing I noticed was she had been, I don't know why she's a she, but all the services I've been referring to her as she, but the Chevette she had been completely repainted, all right? And not like it was like spray paint, spray painted the whole thing. They had also spray painted numbers on the side, okay, on the doors. All the glass was gone. So front windshield, rear windshield, all the windows, the mirror gone off of the vehicle completely. Every knob, switch, and lever had been removed from the car. So it's a steel shell is what it is. It's the car, the steering wheel, all the seats had been removed except for the driver's seat. So it's steering wheel, seat, stick shift. It's pretty much all it was. So as I'm looking at it, I come to the conclusion of what I think happened. Do you think you know what happened to this car? Somebody said, race car. No, it was not made into a race car. They turned our car, I just heard it, into a demolition derby car, right? Without asking, right? They just decided to do this on their own. So we are standing here looking at our car, and one of the mechanics walks out. And you guys, I'm telling you, he went white as a ghost when he saw us standing there. He runs back in, he gets the head mechanic guy, the guy comes out, and he has this, he's as wide-eyed as you can get, and he has this look of, oh my gosh, they're back. Like, they came back. I can't believe it. And he comes over to us, and he's super apologetic. You know, who would come back for this car? We assumed you had left it behind. Well, I know, we're back. You know, we're back for our car. Now, what we didn't share with them was we had found another car that we were going to buy, a used Kia that we had for many years, and we were actually a little worried going back because we didn't want to pay for we were going to have to tow it someplace else and pay for the towing there, and he had done a little bit of work on it, so we kind of acted a little bit more upset than we were, like, how dare you turn my car into a demolition derby car? So we kind of worked out a deal where we'll leave it with you if you waive the charges, The reason I share that story is because what happened here to my precious little baby reminds me a lot of this weekend. So this is today. Today is New Year's Eve, right? And today is about looking back at 2017, looking forward into 2018. And the interesting thing about what he shared when he realized we were back for that car was he tried to sell us on the car a little bit. That's all he could do, right? And I remember at one point he was talking about, well, it's new, like we fixed the engine, so, you're welcome. But that car was not new, was it? It was not. It was masquerading as new, but it was a rebuild from front to back. And a lot of times when I think about New Year's and what the process we're going through, moving from one year to the next, it's not as much about the new you, and it's more about rebuilding the old you, right? And making some repairs to what happened next. I wrote down some things. I don't know about you guys, but I thought 2017 was rough. For me personally, it was. Even just last week was a very tough week for me and dealing with some loss. And I think our country as a whole, it was a kind of a tough year. You may agree or disagree, but it was a tough year. Here's what I wrote down, what I think I should be thinking about New Year's. I should be, New Year's resolutions, positive retrospection, looking back, and hopeful planning for 2018. The new you, I wrote down. I feel like that's what I should be thinking. But here's what I actually end up kind of thinking is disappointment. I wrote down discouragement. Not so much celebrating the successes of last year like I should, but rather trying to figure out what did I do really poorly and how can I be better at fixing those things as I go in? How can I not make those same mistakes next year? Even as I thought through our New Year's resolutions, I looked at, I Googled top New Year's resolutions, and to me, they seem a little bit more like a top 10 list of kind of like fixing yourself more than top 10, like aspirations, what I want to be. I wrote down the top, resolutions that, like, this is over they haven't changed much over the last 10 or 20 years. What do y'all think is number one? You got it. Nailed it. Lose weight. Number 2, eat healthier. Number 3, get out of debt. Spend more time with family. Drink less. Quit smoking. Those are the same ones that they've been since I was probably a kid. There was a new one in there. It was like spend less time on social media. So that's changed a little bit. But to me, that's people looking back going, gosh, what did I do poorly that I need to do better this year? Good news and bad news about New Year's resolutions. How many of you guys in here, raise your hand if you have before or you plan to write out some New Year's resolutions for 2018? Raise your hand. Yikes, not that many. Not that many. They're all at home, sleeping in this morning. Statistically, in America, 45% of our population will write out their New Year's resolutions. Those guys, those 45%, those of you that raised your hand, y'all are 10 times more likely to accomplish your goals than the rest of us lazy bums that aren't doing it. So let's give those guys a round of applause. Yeah, not too much applause, because here's the bad news. Here's the bad news. Of those 45%, 54% of those guys will give up or quit on those goals before 6 months into the new year. And by the time next year comes, only 8% of those people will have fully accomplished their resolutions or their goals. So why is that? Why is it that such a low percent? Why is it that so many of us either choose not to or we give up on our goals going into the new year? And here's what, and this, I may be speaking more for me than you, but this is what I think. This is how I feel, at least. For me, I don't write out my goals very often, and part of that is because of fear of failure. I'll be transparent with you guys. I don't like to do things if I know if there's even a chance that I'm going to be unsuccessful. I don't take on a lot of projects at one time at the house or even at work. I like to do one thing at a time because I want to be able to do it well. Maybe even perfectly, I want to be able to do it to the best of my ability. And I think that is something that people struggle with, this idea of, well, I can see myself making a mistake, or I did make a mistake, and so I'm just going to give up on it completely. That idea, that ideal of that fear of failure I think it's an American ideal. I really do. And I've grown up in Texas my whole life and in North Dallas most of that time, and I feel like it's an area where we are driven to succeed. I don't know if you guys would agree or not, but there's a lot of pressure to be successful, and there's a lot of pressure never to fail. George Patton said famously about America, he said, America loves a winner. America will not tolerate what? A loser. That's right. Now, in reality, that is a very American ideal, but that is not necessarily a biblical one. That's not something that God teaches us through the Scripture. In fact, I'm going to share something with you today that might seem a little shocking. It's not, but I feel when it comes to serving God and having God use you for His purpose, I think God prefers losers. And when I say losers, I mean people that are imperfect, people that are broken, which would describe all of us in here. There's a lot of scripture to support that. In fact, if you just look at some of the great, Bible heroes that we learned about as kids, they were broken. Noah was a drunk. Sarah laughed at God. Moses had rage issues. David struggled with lust. He also struggled with murder. Elijah dealt with depression. And Paul hated Christ followers until he became one himself. So as we dive into the new year, I'm going to keep it really simple today. I want to read a passage for us that I'd love for you to read with. And I just want to kind of take that passage in context of the new year, of looking past, but maybe more importantly, looking forward into 2018. So if you have your Bible, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 through 10. If you have a phone, you can whip that out and look. If you don't have either one of those, that's totally okay. We'll have the message up here. I'm going to focus mainly on one verse in this passage, but I want to read a little bit before and a little bit after just to give us a little bit of context. 2 Corinthians 4, 5 through 10. For whatever we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. Fantastic piece of scripture. Love for you to dive into that. It's more scripture that I am probably capable or want to cover today. We're going to focus on one particular passage, and that is 2 Corinthians 4:7, right here. And I just want to sit on this one a little bit, and I want to kind of get your mindset on that we want to do this in light of New Year's, okay? Let me read this one more time. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. I call this verse the jars of clay verse. To better understand what Paul is saying here about what jars of clay are, we'll kind of dive into that a little bit, but I want to give you a little bit of background just on Paul himself. And Paul's the writer of the second letter to the Corinthians, and he is I think he's one of the greatest men in the history of history and a fantastic thinker and writer, but he had some issues. He had some problems, things that made him broken. And I think as we read this, as we hear about a little bit of his past, it'll help you kind of think through what Paul is saying here. First of all, he was I shared this before, but he was a former Christian hater. His job was he worked with the Pharisees, who were the big Christian know-it-alls at the time, working to persecute those who followed Christ until at one point he had an encounter with Christ himself and became a believer. Well, that probably led him to some insecurity, as now he is trying to lead the church and lead these same people that he was persecuting before. Paul had some physical things going on as well, and he was a great speaker. He was a great church planner. He wrote 13 or 14 of the books of the Bible, but he wasn't a great speaker. In fact, the Pharisees described him as, listen to this, having a personal presence that was as contemptible as his speech. How'd you like to be described that way? So they were saying, hey, not only do we not like what you're saying, we don't even like the way you say it. Maybe even making a comment about the way he looks and the way he presents things, that was an important trait at the time. And finally, Paul didn't even disagree. In his first letter to the Corinthians, he said, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom and eloquence or clever words, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of his power." So Paul knew that, but he probably struggled with it. I would imagine that he probably did. And to top off all those insecurities, he also had what the Bible describes as a thorn in his flesh. He had some sort of physical deformity. We think it was in his eyes, possibly one of his eyes, and something that was visible to everybody. So this guy was struggling with all this stuff. And I'm going to tell you, that makes me, as a pastor, just as a guy who loves the Lord, I feel really inadequate sometimes. And to see the work that the Lord has done through Paul and is still doing through Paul, it gives me a lot of confidence to know that, hey, he was struggling as well. And it helps us, as we dive into this passage, to know a little bit about him. So there's just a couple of takeaways I want you to take away into the new year with this passage. The first takeaway is this right here. The treasure that he's talking about is the gospel. He says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay. First of all, he says, but we. I love that. Don't skip over that part of it. Because he doesn't make his distinction or lack of distinction there is important. He doesn't say, but those of us that go to church more than others, those of us that are more spiritually mature than other people, whatever that would mean, those of us that have done more good than bad, the scales are weighed better in our... That's not what he says. He says, but we. He says in Romans, he says, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Paul's really clear about who this treasure is for, and there's no distinction made there. I like the word treasure. I like that he refers to this gospel as a treasure. When I first started diving into this verse, every time I read the word treasure, I would think of like a treasure chest or gold bullion or something like that. But in reality, all he means by this treasure translates as something of great value. We all have something of great value inside that God has called us to share. And if we want to know what that thing of great value is, you just have to look back at the verse right before the verse that we were talking about. We read this. I'll read it again, though, because this is describing what this treasure is. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Simply put, what that means is the treasure that we have is the gospel. The gospel is just a churchy way of saying the first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the story of Jesus Christ, his life and his death, his birth, which we celebrated last week at Christmas, his life, his death, and his resurrection, and the incredible gift of grace that comes with an understanding of what that is. If you were here a few weeks ago, Mikey was up on stage and he talked about grace. He did a fantastic job, talked about grace to us and grace through us. That's the message that Paul is talking about here. So it's important to know that we have this treasure. And the second takeaway, this is the last takeaway I'm going to give for you guys, is it is important to understand that our brokenness plays an essential part of this treasure. I don't know about you, but that gives me a big sense of relief to know that Paul himself is calling himself a jar of clay. He was a fantastic guy. And for him to refer to himself as an earthen vessel lets a lot of pressure off. My parents, not too long ago, were downsizing their house. And they were getting rid of a bunch of stuff. They had a garage sale. And they had this old wooden box. It was not much to look at. Wooden box. It had 4 long legs, so it stood up about so high. They used it as like a nightstand in one of their back rooms. And they decided before they would throw it out to the garage sale, let's let an appraiser look at it because we knew it was old. We didn't know how old or whatever, so they decided to have an appraiser come and look at it. The appraiser took a look at it. It was an old humidor is what it was. But when he opened that thing up, he noticed on the inside of the lid there was a faint painting of an American flag, but what made it special was that American flag only had 13 stars on it. They ended up selling that wooden box for $25,000 at auction, right? Sometimes something very ordinary on the outside can have incredible value when you look inside. So let's look at this jars of clay idea, because Paul's referring to himself, he's referring to us as jars of clay. I kind of dove into what jars of clay were at the time, trying to kind of figure out what was in his head. And I came to 2 kind of descriptors on what he would mean when he would say, when he would describe all jars of clay back in the day. One, pretty simple concepts here, but first of all, they were all fragile. Second of all, their value was based on their purpose. Now, both those things, I think, as we look inside, we look at ourselves as humans, we could say, okay, well, I get it. It's kind of referring to us here, too. When I say fragile, I mean literally made of dirt, right? That's what jars of clay were. They were easily broken, easily discarded. Genesis 2:7 says that we are born from the dust of the ground the same way. We will end up in the ground at some point, all of us, the same way these jars of clay were. It's a reminder to us of how fragile our lives are. We're fragile emotionally, spiritually, physically. Anybody in here, anybody who's over the age of 30 years old probably can attest to the fact that they feel their body is deteriorating. I was a youth pastor for about 1,000 years, okay? I called myself at one point the world's oldest youth pastor. Never got any recognition for that. I'm not sure it was accurate or not, but I was always looking for something fun to do with the kids. And one time, this is late in my career as a youth pastor, I was probably approaching 40 years old. Body is starting to break down, but I'm still at the stage where I won't recognize that, you know what I'm saying? And I'm still trying to do everything that the kids can do. And I discovered a new sport, and it's called foot golf. Has anybody played foot golf before? Not a human being in the room. All right, let me tell you what it is. It is exactly what you think it is. It's a combination of soccer and golf, okay? So you go out to a golf. By the way, we were much cooler looking than these guys right here. Let me tell you that. Why is this guy, he's wearing a sweater vest. Anyway, so there's a couple of courses around this area. We went to a course in Louisville, and what they do is you rent or bring a soccer ball instead of bringing your clubs and a golf ball, and you just kick a soccer ball, and they carve out these giant holes for you to get. It's really fun, and it kind of, everybody's equal out there, and it's just a ton of fun to bring a group to. So I decided I'm going to do this. I announce it, and my wife, as always, she's like, hold the phone, Monroe. Remember, you're 40 years old here, so don't, maybe you should go out and warm yourself up or whatever. So the day before, I listened to her, and I did. I went out with my daughter, and I kicked the soccer ball around. I was dominating her, so I felt really good about myself, She was 5, but I was killing her. And really built up the confidence. And so the next day I go out and I take about 30 or 40 high schoolers out there. And we get out there and we rent our stuff and everything. And we get out to the first hole. We've all got our soccer balls ready to go. And this was my first mistake, okay? First of all, I was like, all right, guys, let's all stretch out for a minute. Don't ever suggest to a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds they need to stretch out, okay? Because they don't. Their bodies are perfect still, you know what I'm saying? And but I knew I needed to. I could hear my wife, talking to me in my head. And so I'm like, give me a minute, guys. And I'm on the ground, stretching out my legs and everything. They're ridiculing me the whole time. but it's all going to be worth it, right? Because I'm going to dominate these jokers. So we get ready to go. I literally remember like, all right, guys, move aside, because I wanted to be first. And I put my soccer ball down, and I back up. I'm getting ready to go. And I'm making this very dramatic here. This is the first kick or drive, whatever you want to call it, on the first hole. And let me tell you, I didn't even care about where the flag was. I just wanted to kick it to the moon. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to show him how awesome it was. So I come up, and I'm like, and I kid you not, the second my foot touches the ball, a muscle in my leg explodes. Like, explodes. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, I literally heard a pop noise when I hit the ball. And I knew it was over. Like, it was over. Super embarrassing for me. I feel the need to say this to everybody. I did birdie that hole. Let me say that, first of all. It was a fantastic kick. But I struggled for 3 months, I'll be honest with you, to repair. One more reminder to me that my body is fragile. My body is breaking down. We all are. I feel that physically. I feel that emotionally. I feel that spiritually sometimes. God created us this way. That's the way we are. That's not the only thing that kind of connects us with jars of clay. As I said before, jars of clay, their value was based on, what was inside of them or what was their purpose. Now, a jar of clay at the time, you didn't go out and buy jars of clay. You would just make them, all right? You gathered dirt, you gathered water, and you baked it in the heat. So they were everywhere, I'm sure. I'm sure some people carried valuables in them, their coins or jewels or whatever, but for the most part, they were pretty common household type things, carrying food and water. The most common use for a jar of clay, and there's no great way to say this, was human waste or garbage. Okay, that was the most common use for these things. So, not very glamorous, right? So when I hear Paul say that that's who he is, who we are, this is the message that I get. This is what I hear from him. It is okay for a perfect message to be carried by an imperfect messenger. And as you're diving into 2018, this is the message that I want you to, as you're planning, as you're thinking, maybe you're going to do some resolutions, maybe not, but this is what I want you to hear. In fact, let's say it together. Let's say it out loud. It is perfect for I messed it up. What is wrong with you guys? Sorry. It is tricked, psych. It is okay for a perfect message to be carried by an imperfect messenger. Well done. Y'all did a great job. I've been in ministry for you can't tell. I've been in ministry for a long time. And one of the things I hear a lot is, hey, David, I'm not comfortable sharing with people the message of Jesus' life or death, or any message for the scripture for that matter. I'm just not comfortable because of my own baggage, the things that haunt me, the things that I've done. You don't know what I've done. You don't know what I'm doing right now. You don't know the things that I'm struggling with, and I don't, but God does, okay? And God understands that we are not perfect. That's what he has to work with, right? So I want to share with you guys one last thing here, because I feel like a lot of times I struggle with this as much or more than anybody else. Being a pastor, I feel like there's even additional kind of weight, like how David must know, because he's been in ministry for a long time, and most of the time I'm struggling with the same things that other people are struggling with. This came up a few weeks ago. I was meeting with my life group, and let me also say, if you're not in a life group, I would very much encourage you to jump in one. It has been really transformative in our lives. But sometimes in our life group, they will turn to me or turn to my wife if there's something about family, and it did. I don't remember the question, but it was about family. Oh, it's David, come up with a great answer, and I was ready to expound, incredible wisdom. But my wife shut it down, which she likes to do. And she was like, hold the phone, everybody. Let me tell you a story about how terrible of a father David is. And then let me see if you still want his advice, okay? I'm going to share this story with you, partially because it's a good example, but also I kind of want to lay it to rest, okay? We've told this story multiple times. I really feel like we're both at fault, but I feel like she's a little bit more at fault. She feels differently. I'm going to let you guys decide for us today, okay? Does that sound okay with everybody? Here's a picture of my lovely family. This was a few years ago, and this is my older daughter, Grace Ann, and this is my youngest, Charlie, and my wife, Tara. We had Charlie late in life. She was a little surprise blessing that the Lord gave to us. Thank goodness he did. But I'm going to be honest with you, we were still kind of in only child mode when we had her. Grace Ann was a little bit older. She was 7 going on 8 years old, and we were just riding along, and then Charlie came. And this was very early, right after we had Charlie. It was one of the first times we had gone out with her. And so we're kind of getting back in that mode with strollers and diapers and all those things. And we decided to go to Target to go shopping, okay? That's where I need y'all to pay attention, okay? So we get there, and we go into the store, and my wife and I make an unspoken agreement, as all of us have done at different times, that we're both going to push something through the store, right? So I have the stroller, because that's how I had started coming out of the car, and I've got Charlie in the stroller, and my wife has the cart, and she's going to push that through the store, okay? Good to go. We're both pushing something through the store. We do our shopping, we come around, and we ended up making our way all the way back around to the front where, you know where like that dollar section is, like right up front? It's always crazy. There's stuff on the floor, and people are screaming, and it's a terrible area. It's really crammed in there. And we get kind of hung up in that dollar area, and we're doing some shopping, and then it's time to get out of there. Well, the cart is in front of the stroller. I can't get the stroller around the cart, so I step forward and I take the cart, because we're both, somebody already caught on to where we're going with this, because we both agreed to push something, right? So stop it. All right, so I start pushing the cart, right? And I'm pushing the cart through the store with my family behind me, and we get about 100 yards away, and my oldest daughter looks up at me, and she goes, "Hey, Daddy, where's the baby?" Right? And I turn around, and I look, and there's my daughter, my older daughter, and there's my wife, and where I had gone from pushing the stroller to pushing the cart, my wife had gone from pushing the cart to pushing nothing, okay? Right? And she's just walking, swinging her arms, checking her phone, doing some bills. I don't know what she was doing, but both hands were free. And I panicked, you guys. Some of y'all have, after I told this story, about hundreds of y'all have had this happen apparently, because I had a lot of people share stories, but I got that feeling, in your stomach, and I didn't say anything. I just ran. I ran as fast as I could back to that dollar section. I get there, and my baby is gone. My baby is gone. So what do you do? What do? Do you call the cops? I don't know. My first thought, I don't know if this is right or wrong, is go to the exit and block it. Like, store's closed, people. There's 2 exits, so I don't know I guess my wife is going to have to stop that one, but make yourself big and make a lot of noise. That's what you do when you fight a bear and when you've lost your baby in Target. And so I'm on my way to the exit, and I notice in customer service, my baby is over there, right? And I go over there, a sweet lady had rolled her into customer service, and I get there, and I was super apologetic. I remember pulling out my ID. I don't know what that's going to do. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." The Target, in case this happens, does not care. They're like, "What? You're like the 3rd guy today, man. Yeah, take your baby, They don't care at all. But you know who did care? My wife did, but that lady that rolled the stroller up, boy, I had to peel her hands off of that stroller. She did not want to give the baby to this right here. So my wife got there, and we settled it all out, and we did. So imagine a family pastor who can't even keep track of his infant baby at Target, right? I've never felt less like a family. I've never felt less like a pastor. I've never felt less like a father than I did that day. But here's the good news. It is okay for me to pastor. It's okay for me to talk to people about family. It's okay for us to share the message of Christ with the people that are around us, even when we're imperfect, because God chooses that we are all God has to work with. If he only had perfect people, the message would not be shared, right? Side note, I think we would all agree, right? That was clearly my wife's fault. Right? Thank you. All right, good. All right. I'll let her know that y'all feel that way. All right. So let's finish this up. The why here. I always like to give a why. So why is it important that Paul talks about this treasure? Why is it important that he makes us, he's really clear that we're jars of clay? And this is the why right here. To show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. That's why. It's the same kind of power that restores, renews, forgives. It's the power of grace. And it's the power that we should be thinking about as we go into this new year. God created us in his likeness, perfect in every way, but we break that. Adam broke that relationship. We're born into sin. We've broken that relationship. God gave us another solution, the new covenant. He gave us Jesus Christ, his life, his death, his resurrection, and the grace that comes with that. This message depends on us being broken. God is okay with our imperfections, as those same imperfections direct people and reinforce the value and the necessity of grace itself. And that's the message that I'd love for you guys to take into this next year. So as you start thinking about New Year's resolutions and what am I going to do differently next year, I would challenge you to challenge yourselves and say, what has God called me to be? How do I become the best person that God has called me to be? Don't worry about whether or not you can do it perfectly. Worry about, hey, what is the message that God is calling me to share? I'm doing New Year's resolutions this year. And instead of, I've written them out. My theme is, I'll be transparent with you, I'll share it with you. It's connection with God. I want to pray more. I need to spend more time intentionally praying and walking with the Lord. I want to connect better with my neighbors and sharing the message with them. I do a great job at church, but sometimes those people that are closest to me in my home, I fail in that area. I want to connect better with my wife. I put down 2 date nights a month, and I want to connect better with the things that fill my cup. And for me, those are like hobbies and the things that kind of get you going. For me, it's cycling. I love to ride my bike, and I just haven't done that as much as I should this year, and so I'm going to do that more. So that's what's written on this piece of paper right here. But instead, and I would encourage you to do something like this if you can, and take it or leave it, but instead of posting it on my desk or on the fridge or on a mirror or something like that, or putting it on my phone, I've decided to put it in this little jar of clay. Okay? And I'm going to sit that on my desk. And that jar of clay will be a reminder to me that when I fail at some of those things, that it's okay. God is okay for a perfect message, because a perfect message to be translated through an imperfect messenger. And it's going to be a reminder of the grace that covers all of my brokenness. So let me close in prayer, and then we'll let you guys head out. Dear Father, Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for the opportunity we have to share a little bit about New Year's and about your expectations for us, Lord. Thank you for the grace that covers all of our brokenness. Lord, I pray for safety tonight. I pray for wisdom and discernment as we go out and do the things that we're doing on New Year's, and that you will just keep us all protected and safe. We love you, Lord. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.